Our investigation centers on a harrowing series of events in Arkansas. It began with a young girl's testimony, a chilling account of brutality delivered to specialists that would ignite a massive investigation. 6-year-old Jersey Bridgeman was subjected to unthinkable cruelty, restrained to a dresser by a belt for the crime of seeking food. Authorities were first alerted to the growing darkness inside the Rogers residence after reports surfaced of Jersey being shackled like an animal, a silver dog collar fastened around her small frame. David and Desiree, the girl's estranged parents, navigated a fractured co-parenting arrangement through shared custody. While her mother's home offered sanctuary, her father's house was a living nightmare that eventually led to his and his wife's arrest. Standing before a judge, the father confessed to the restraints, framing his cruelty as a necessary measure to control her curiosity. Detective Larry Taylor of the Rogers Police documented this disturbing justification within the official court affidavit. The father claimed sleepwalking was the issue, citing unemployment as the reason they could not afford a simple safety gate. Poverty became his excuse for escalation, moving from a modified ankle belt to a more permanent solution involving a metal lock. Jersey's pleas regarding the physical pain were ignored. Instead of liberation, the restraint was merely repositioned to her waist. By the tail end of 2011, justice arrived for David and Jana. David eventually admitted to felony charges of child endangerment and unlawful imprisonment. The court handed down a sentence of 18 years behind bars. The stepmother received 12 years for her role, plus an additional 3 for violating her previous probation. Following the trial, Jersey finally found stability under her biological mother's full-time care. She enrolled at Sugar Creek Elementary, and by March 2012, the family resettled at 608 Southeast A Street. Their new neighbors were the Hollys, Zachary, and Amanda, a pair of newlyweds living right next door. A deep bond formed between Amanda and Desiree, turning a fresh beginning into what seemed like an ideal support system. Despite a lifetime of trauma condensed into 6 years, Jersey remained a vibrant, affectionate child known for her resilient spirit. Observers were baffled by her strength, noting how she carried her burdens while never losing her radiant smile. Friends recalled her devotion to her younger sister Leah, a role Jersey embraced with genuine warmth and care. It appeared the shadows of her past were finally being replaced by light. November 20th, 2012, Bentonville, Arkansas. Just 6 days after her birthday, at 6:43 in the morning. Bentonville, 911. State the location of your emergency. 608 Southeast A Street. Units were dispatched to the residence following a frantic report. Jersey Bridgeman had vanished without a trace. Desiree, the girl's mother, explained she returned from her shift around 11 o'clock the previous night, November 19th. With both adults working, Jersey and her sister were left in the care of their neighbors at number 702. The Hollys were the family's trusted child care providers during those late-night shifts. Upon her return, Zachary assisted by carrying a sleeping Jersey home, while Desiree took the 2-year-old in her arms. The 2 young girls were tucked into a shared bed for the night. In a fleeting moment of consciousness, Jersey whispered her signature phrase of affection. She loved her mother to the moon and back. At dawn, Desiree entered the room to find an empty bed. A frantic search revealed the house was silent and devoid of her daughter. She reached out to her own mother in a panic, who suggested the typical hiding spots children often favor. But Jersey was not beneath the furniture or tucked away in a closet. The realization hit that the police were now the only option. Looking outside, she spotted Amanda on the porch, but the neighbor's bewildered expression offered no clues to Jersey's whereabouts. Law enforcement arrived with urgency, understanding that in cases of missing children, the clock is the most ruthless enemy. Investigators faced a critical gap in time, unsure exactly when the girl had been taken from her bed. Immediate sweeps of both the Bridgeman and Holly residences yielded nothing. Jersey had seemingly evaporated into the night. With no evidence of a break-in, the mystery deepened until Officer Travis Nichols spotted a subtle anomaly. Seeing the rear entrance to 704 standing ajar, Nichols and Officer Mike Henson moved to investigate. Inside the abandoned structure, they found only shadows and discarded refuse littering the cold floor. Infiltrating the silent home, investigators discovered a lifeless form sprawled across the bedroom floor. They immediately retreated, cordoning off the site to await legal clearance. Jersey's grandmother arrived on the scene, her voice trembling as she asked a visibly shaken officer if the child was inside. He offered no words, only a hollow stare. In that chilling silence, she realized the outcome was catastrophic. The unclothed remains of Jersey Bridgeman were eventually located inside a bedroom closet, just 2 doors away from her own residence. Found face down, she had been strangled by her own pajama bottoms, wound 3 times around her throat. The father faced the soul-crushing task of identifying the body. While the team waited for the judicial search warrant to be processed, Detective Corporal J.C. Wisman interrogated Desiree to reconstruct the timeline. She claimed that at 6:38 a.m., she checked the bedroom. Jersey had vanished, leaving no trace within the house. That was the sum total of her knowledge. As the perimeter was secured and news crews swarmed, the local community struggled to process the unfolding nightmare. Information remained frustratingly scarce despite the public's desperation. A small bicycle sat abandoned in the grass outside her former home. A withered balloon adorned with princesses lay nearby, a haunting contrast to the violence that had occurred. With no immediate suspects, local authorities joined forces with the FBI to profile and question every registered sex offender in the vicinity. A ranking official stated that the investigation would scrutinize everyone within the young girl's immediate social circle. Federal agents are now working alongside Bentonville police, pooling resources to crack the case. Multiple interviews were conducted, and 3 houses within the victim's neighborhood underwent intensive forensic searches. Officials maintain that despite the lack of an arrest, the criminal inquiry is advancing rapidly. The lead investigator expressed confidence that every necessary measure was being taken and that the truth was within their grasp. Nevertheless, 2 days have elapsed with the specific details of the homicide remaining elusive. The identities of those questioned and the underlying evidence remain classified. Authorities have kept the cause of death and any potential signs of physical trauma hidden from the public eye. This tragedy weighs heavily on the family and has left a deep psychological scar on the entire community. The pursuit of justice has become an urgent priority for everyone involved in this dark chapter. Police confirmed the holiday weekend would not slow their momentum, as the neighborhood remains paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The child's body was recovered from the shadows of a vacant house situated directly behind me. Though obscured by the tree line and failing light, that structure has been under constant police surveillance since the discovery. The Bentonville chief has officially declared this a homicide, as the manhunt for those responsible intensifies this morning. These are the facts established thus far. Forensic teams spent much of Tuesday scouring the exterior of the home where the 6-year-old was last seen alive. She was eventually found just 2 properties away from where she had lived. Today, additional evidence is being transported to the state lab in Little Rock as police await warrants for further neighborhood searches. Investigators have identified several persons of interest residing here on Southeast A Street. That residence is one of many being targeted for thorough inspection as legal permissions are secured through the courts. Numerous questions remain unanswered this morning, while the investigative team remains uncharacteristically silent. The public is waiting to learn the child's final fate and how close authorities are to catching a killer. Amanda Holly was among the primary individuals brought in for questioning. Her testimony mirrored Desiree's. She had watched Jersey the night before the girl returned home with her mother. Detectives also interviewed her husband, Zachary, who recalled checking the clock at exactly 3:35. Zachary, 28, lived with Amanda and her child while struggling with persistent health issues. Employed at a local eatery, he possessed a prior criminal history that drew immediate police interest. His record included 3 arrests, 1 for public intoxication and 2 for defying court mandates. His past was defined by trauma, involving a mother lost to addiction and a childhood of severe physical and sexual victimization. He claimed a stomach ailment woke him at 3:35 a.m., prompting a walk to a convenience store 150 yards away. Surveillance footage from the store was later found to verify his movements during that time. He allegedly returned home to sleep until 6:30 a.m., when he began preparing his 4-year-old stepson for school. Within 10 minutes, a panicked Desiree informed Amanda that Jersey had completely disappeared. Overwhelmed by panic and unable to find her daughter, Desiree contacted 911, though her distress forced her to hand the receiver to Amanda. Desiree then hurried to the Easy Mart to inform her partner that Jersey had vanished without a trace. This store was the same location Zachary had visited. He maintained his innocence and remained fully compliant throughout the police questioning. He surrendered the clothing he wore the previous night and provided a biological sample for genetic profiling to the authorities. Investigators were also able to verify that Brandon, Desiree's boyfriend, was present at his place of employment during the incident. As the morning progressed, detectives secured a legal warrant and initiated a forensic sweep of Unit 704. The remains were transported to the State Forensic Lab in Arkansas, where a medical examiner performed an autopsy on Wednesday, November 21st. While analyzing Zachary's account, investigators questioned if his trip to the convenience store was a calculated attempt to manufacture an alibi. Consequently, they brought him in for further questioning and executed 2 additional search authorizations. Warrants were served for Jersey's residence and the home shared by Zachary and Amanda, who frequently provided childcare for the victim. This routine babysitting arrangement had never raised any prior suspicions. The autopsy results were gruesome enough to haunt veteran investigators, confirming that 6-year-old Jersey had succumbed to mechanical asphyxia. Forensic evidence also revealed sexual assault. Lab technicians worked through the Thanksgiving holiday to extract a DNA profile from biological evidence. Detectives pressed forward with the investigation, conducting interviews and gathering genetic samples from multiple persons of interest. The school district announced they were implementing a crisis plan to help students navigate the tragedy and process the loss. Specialized grief counselors were made available to students and parents, providing the necessary psychological support to handle the disturbing nature of the crime. A crowd of over 100 mourners gathered at the Children's Advocacy Center for a candlelight vigil, visibly shattered by the news. The community sought a way to navigate their collective trauma and the profound sense of despair and unanswered questions currently weighing on the hearts of every local resident. The vigil was seen as a necessary step for the town to begin acknowledging this senseless act of violence. The date was Friday, November 23, 2012. To be perfectly clear, Zach, you are choosing to undergo this polygraph examination of your own free will, correct? I assume this is to clear your name. Yes. I want you to catch the person who did this. Zachary reached out to Sergeant Chris Moffat personally, stating his desire to undergo a lie detector test. 3 days later, the polygraph data was ready. Zachary was intercepted by police before he could attend Jersey's funeral service. Simultaneously, the forensic laboratory had finalized the DNA results recovered from the young victim's body. Though he initially maintained his facade of innocence, it wasn't long before his psychological resolve finally crumbled. He eventually confessed to the act, describing how he placed the ligature around her neck and tightened it. He then illustrated the crime scene, sketching a map that showed her body left in the hallway near the bathroom. This breakthrough was the direct result of a calculated and patient investigative strategy. By keeping specific evidence away from the media, they ensured only the perpetrator could identify the exact details of the scene. Those details were known only to Zachary Holly, the trusted neighbor who was subsequently placed under arrest for the crime. This was the man captured in news footage at the scene, standing near the police line in a striped hat and jacket. This was the same individual who had looked into the cameras and denied any involvement in the girl's disappearance. This was the man the victim had affectionately referred to as Uncle Zach. Bentonville authorities confirmed that 28-year-old Zachary Dwayne Holly is charged with capital murder, kidnapping, and residential burglary. Reporting from outside the suspect's residence at 702 Southeast A Street this morning, the house is situated between Jersey Bridgeman's home and the site where her remains were discovered on Tuesday. The multi-agency probe was supported by the Rogers Police, the Benton County Sheriff, and several local task forces. These groups comprise the Regional Child Abduction Response Team, which worked tirelessly to resolve the case. The Arkansas State Crime Lab provided the critical forensic evidence necessary to secure a swift arrest in this investigation. Although family members did not attend the official press conference, they were notified of the arrest in person. Chief Simpson informed the family of the breakthrough at the funeral home during the visitation, providing some closure before the service. Authorities confirmed a press briefing was scheduled for later this evening. The grieving family has been briefed. It remains unclear if any officers present shared a blood relation with Jersey Bridgeman. Returning to the report from Julie Pickard, a neighbor living adjacent to the crime scene recalled Zachary sobbing uncontrollably the day following the discovery. Detectives later questioned her regarding a suspect seen in Mountain Dew branded sleepwear. That specific attire was known to belong to Zachary. Mourners are currently converging on Rollins Funeral Home as the viewing begins. Among those present are the faculty members from Sugar Creek Elementary, where Jersey attended kindergarten. Hours earlier, educators delivered the grim reality to the students and fielded their difficult inquiries. Principal Pam Blair focused strictly on the confirmed fatality and the active status of the probe. Students utilized art and writing to articulate their internal trauma, allowing staff to identify those requiring acute psychological support, particularly the devastated 3rd and 4th graders. Between 35 and 40 children sought professional counseling. Mourners at Bentonville Cemetery planned to wear purple, the signature color of the young victim. The state rejected the incarcerated father's request to attend the services. A sea of neighbors and officers arrived to honor the memory of 6-year-old Jersey Bridgeman. The Bentonville Police Department provided a formal motorcade for the final journey. Peace remains elusive, yet her legacy is etched into the town's collective memory. Those close to her remember 6-year-old Jersey as a gentle soul. Despite her hardships, she possessed a quiet, resilient joy. Her radiant smile was her trademark, reflecting a profound devotion to her kin. Chief John Simpson declined to elaborate on the specific horrors or the evidence incriminating Zachary. Information regarding a potential motive remains strictly confidential. Legal documents submitted by the prosecution allege that Zachary restrained Jersey with the intent of committing heinous sexual atrocities. Capital punishment is on the table. Meanwhile, Zachary Holly was reportedly targeted by other inmates. Within the walls of the county detention center, an individual held for parole violations infiltrated his cell under the guise of distributing linens. Though Zachary's injuries were minor, many viewed the assault as a form of street justice. The legal system in Benton County is expected to provide further retribution. Reports of the morning beating suggest a volatile environment for the accused. Captain Chris Spark acknowledged that the high-profile nature of the crime made Zachary a marked man. The facility maintains its obligation to protect every detainee, regardless of their alleged crimes. Clad in orange and shielded by guards, he maintained a chilling silence before the media. The trusted figure now stands indicted for abduction, burglary, homicide, and aggravated sexual assault. As the gravity of the charges was recited, his hands trembled uncontrollably. Legal counsel was appointed to navigate his defense. Denied bail, he entered a standard plea of not guilty to the entire indictment. In the procedural world of arraignments, a guilty plea would merely waive the state's requirement to prove its case. Expert Andrew Sheeler suggests the severity of the charges makes a settlement nearly impossible. Given the push for the death penalty, the state shows little interest in compromise. The brief proceedings left Desiree Bridgeman, Jersey's mother, in a state of visible anguish. Following the not guilty plea, she made a swift exit surrounded by relatives. Investigators contacted the victim's uncle. He declined an interview, merely noting the difficulty of the situation. Within the girl's former community, violet ribbons remained tied to trees, serving as a silent homage to the 6-year-old and a sign of a town that continues to grieve. Dual psychiatric assessments were conducted by state and defense experts, both concluding the defendant possessed the mental fitness to face a jury. Legal proceedings stalled when a member of the defense team withdrew from the case unexpectedly. The lawyer cited an inability to provide adequate representation due to his own struggles with clinical depression and substance dependency, rendering him unfit for the courtroom. This forced the appointment of new counsel, a setback that deeply frustrated the victim's grieving family. Ultimately, the day of reckoning arrived as the trial commenced. Observers noted the defendant's palpable anxiety as the hearing opened. Among the first to take the stand was state pathologist Dr. Frank Peretti. The doctor reconstructed the victim's final moments, describing how she desperately gripped the sleepwear used to end her life. The examiner recalled that the nature of the fatality was immediately apparent upon his initial inspection. He detailed how her hair and a handmade school necklace were entwined in the fabric. The defendant visibly trembled at these words. Expert testimony confirmed the presence of ruptured blood vessels in her eyes, a hallmark of manual asphyxiation. Questioned on the mechanics of death, he explained the physiological terror, noting it takes 60 to 80 seconds for such internal damage to manifest. He hypothesized a brief window of agony, followed by a descent into unconsciousness. Forensic images documenting the child's extensive trauma were displayed to the court. The sheer brutality of the photographs left the gallery shaken, creating a heavy atmosphere of collective distress. While harrowing, the visual evidence laid bare the true monstrosity of the crime committed. The defendant remained stoic before the images, though the room fell into a stunned hush when his police interrogation was aired. Genetic profiles linking him directly to the scene were introduced by the prosecution. Forensic specialist Lisa Channel, from the State Crime Laboratory, provided expert testimony. She noted that hair samples found on the victim didn't match the suspect, though environmental factors had compromised the samples. Physical evidence and biological traces confirmed the victim had been subjected to a brutal sexual assault. Biological material recovered from her clothing was analyzed by Chief Examiner Melissa Myant. She informed the jurors that the genetic markers pointed overwhelmingly to the defendant with absolute scientific conviction. 2 separate samples yielded genetic material matching the suspect's profile. She clarified that while the match wasn't definitive in every instance, the defendant remained the only viable source. The defense rested without calling a single witness, conceding from the start that their client had indeed killed the young girl. The jury returned a guilty verdict on counts of home invasion, abduction, sexual assault, and homicide. The legal team shifted their focus toward a desperate attempt to avoid a capital sentence. During the penalty phase, various individuals were summoned to the stand. A social worker from California detailed his formative years, aiming to paint a picture of a childhood defined by trauma and abandonment. Records showed 15 separate reports of maltreatment and sexual victimization suffered by the defendant during his youth. His upbringing was nomadic, involving 9 foster placements and 23 school changes as his mother's addiction worsened. The witness lamented a systemic failure that allowed the boy to vanish into the shadows of the welfare state. Despite the red flags, he was only briefly separated from his toxic environment before being sent back. She admitted to the court that the authorities had fundamentally failed in their duty to safeguard him. The jurors faced a heavy burden, determining if the crime warranted the ultimate price. The judge spent over 30 minutes detailing the legal protocols before the panel withdrew to deliberate. The verdict was final: 20 years for the break-in, consecutive life terms for the assault, and a death sentence for the murder. Counsel requested a formal polling of the jury to confirm the decision was shared by all. Each juror stood to affirm the penalty. In the aftermath, the condemned man finally broke his silence. He offered a brief statement, expressing remorse for the devastation he had unleashed. "I hope you find the grace to forgive me," he said, as the steel handcuffs snapped shut. She pledged to love her remaining daughters, choosing to endure as a mother for the 2 girls still home. The family lived in a perpetual wake, but finally, the shadow of that terrible day began to lift. They could finally cherish her memory, reclaiming the joy of her life from the grip of the nightmare. From death row at the Virginia Supermax, Zachary Holly began the cold process of challenging his execution. His defense scrutinized the judge, seeking a flaw in the trial's legal foundation. They claimed Judge Brad Caron erred by refusing to dismiss the charge of residential burglary. He argued the jury never knew of his guilty plea offer, a fact he claimed proved he took responsibility. Additionally, his final attempt involved a failed motion to bury the confession he had provided to investigators. The Arkansas Supreme Court found his logic hollow, ruling the original sentence would remain unchanged. For prosecutor Nathan Smith, the ruling was a vital victory in a case defined by legal maneuvering. He hoped this decision would spare Jersey's family the trauma of enduring another lengthy trial. Holly appealed once more, alleging his own lawyers were incompetent, demanding his conviction and death sentence be overturned. He also claimed the jury lacked sufficient evidence regarding the true depth of his mental health issues. To date, every attempt to challenge his fate has failed. From prison, Jersey's father admitted he knew of the killer, though he initially refused to believe the truth. He confessed his addiction had blinded him, leading to a tragic failure in protecting his young daughter. He claimed he wasn't evil, but admitted to making choices that would haunt him for his entire existence. Jersey Bridgeman's story remains a chilling reminder of the fragility of innocence and the capacity for cruelty. It is haunting to realize her life ended at the hands of someone she should have trusted. Jersey deserved a future. She deserved the simple dignity of growing up and finding her way. Her spirit remained resilient despite the darkness, serving as a testament to a child who kept her smile. The tragedy of Jersey Bridgeman is not just a dark chapter in true crime history. It is a profound, heart-shattering summons to our collective conscience. Her story serves as a haunting reminder that innocence is fragile, and the safety of a child is a sacred trust that must never be broken. Jersey's life was a battle between unimaginable shadows and a radiant, resilient spirit. Even after enduring cruelty at the hands of those meant to protect her, she continued to love to the moon and back. This teaches us the depth of a child's capacity for forgiveness, but more importantly, it exposes the devastating weight of our responsibility. The lesson is clear. Silence is the accomplice of cruelty. We must look closer, listen better, and act faster. True protection requires more than just locks on doors. It requires a community that refuses to look away. We must honor Jersey by becoming the shield for every child in the shadows. Let her legacy be a world where Uncle Zach is a title of safety, not a mask for a monster. Watch over them, speak for them, love them fiercely, because every child deserves a future where their only job is to keep their radiant smile.